World of Warcraft has been released for almost 20 years, and over that time Blizzard has added 9 expansions to the game. But it seems like the community consensus is that the game has been on a steady decline. There are many theories for why this is, and in this video I'm going to be giving my opinion on why the game failed to improve. November 23rd, 2004. Players jumped into a vast open world that they had only gotten a taste of in the original Warcraft RTS games. People were instantly hooked, and the game quickly took over as the most played MMO in the world. Something about it made players constantly coming back and wanting more. Was it the combat, the movement, the animations and graphics? While these are things we typically consider criteria for good games today, there was one thing that World of Warcraft had that no game has done better since: immersion and paradigms of reality. Now you may be confused about that second one, but I promise I'll explain. But first we need to look at the psychology of MMOs and why they became popular in the first place. In a study conducted in 2006, 2 researchers found that you can use self-determination theory to understand why people play MMOs. According to self-determination theory, the 3 psychological needs to gain motivation for something are autonomy, competence, and relatedness. In this context, autonomy refers to each player's feeling of ability to carve out their own identity so that they can stand out from the crowd. MMOs are the only type of game where you can spend hundreds of hours in a shared world in order to make yourself more and more unique and have the choice to do whatever you want. Maybe you want to become the blacksmith that everybody comes to for weapon or armor. Maybe you want to be a famous gladiator or assassin. MMOs enable players to do these kind of things and give them a kind of free will. Competence refers to people's innate desire to become more powerful and masterful in their chosen identity. You don't want to be just a blacksmith, you want to be the blacksmith. You don't want to be an assassin, you want to be the well-known terror of a specific town or city. Relatedness is the need to feel connected to a community and have a belonging in a group. Why do people want to join guilds and group up in World of Warcraft? So they have a group they could feel a part of and share their experiences with. And if the game won't allow these criteria, many players will lose motivation. The important thing about this study is that it shows that people interact with MMOs in the same way they interact with real life. In real life, why do people take up new hobbies or set goals for themselves? For the same reasons that players set goals for themselves in MMOs: autonomy, competence, and relatedness. When World of Warcraft originally released, the game treated players as any other inhabitant of the world, not telling them that they were the champion of Azeroth or destined to save the world, but only telling them that there is a grand world out there and they will have to get out of it what they put in. But why is that motivating for players? Well, we know that it drives players' motivation to feel like they have the ability to carve out their own path and make something great of themselves, to set their own goals. To go back to my original point, the 2 reasons World of Warcraft became so popular was because of its immersion and paradigms of reality. Immersion is important to hook players in and make them feel like it's a living, breathing world, filled with mystery and depth. And the paradigms of reality tap into people's psychological needs for motivation to keep them playing. That is truly the 2 base requirements for an MMO to be enjoyable. Many people online believe that the game started to go downhill during its 3rd expansion, Cataclysm. But I believe that the concept of expansions was fundamentally flawed from the beginning. When World of Warcraft originally released, the world was cohesive and everything was tied together. It made the game feel so much more immersive. Every zone had its own purpose, and there was always a reason to go back to each. And when you saw someone with cool looking armor, you knew they were the real deal. This made people believe that they were in a living, breathing world. Expansions in World of Warcraft increased the level cap, equalized everyone's power levels, and invalidated all previous zones. First, they added Outland, which invalidated the entire old world, then Northrend, which invalidated Outland, and so on. With every expansion, the game lost a little bit of its soul. Eventually, 90% of the game world was completely useless. Looking cool and having good-looking mounts was not anything impressive, because it all could have come from an older expansion. And the game started treating every player like they were the heroes of Azeroth, not allowing them to decide who they actually want to be. In addition to that, the developers started adding in-game purchases for cosmetics or even just buying gold. As Blizzard removed aspects of the original game, the immersion of the game dropped, and it stopped mimicking more and more real-life paradigms. The problem stemmed from laziness and corporate greed. Instead of thinking of ways to improve the immersion of the original game, Blizzard opted to remarket each expansion as a whole new experience, which worked well for a time, but they started seeing drops in numbers as players realized what was going on. It reminds me of Game of Thrones. The passion and success of the early versions of the product fueled the flames for future mediocrity and greed. As the original developers either lost passion or left the company, the game slowly became less and less special. If Blizzard wanted to take the game in a better direction, they should have focused on improving the original game world and adding content that made everything feel more immersive. For example, they could have kept adding content to the world by creating open-world dungeons and raids of greatly varying difficulty, forcing players to band together to take on foes. They could have created mysteries and riddles in the world that the community had to solve together to grant a select few great powers. They could have expanded on players' ability to play the game in their own way, removing a streamlined process of leveling and adding the ability to level up by other means other than fighting. They could have added player housing, player-elected roles that impact the game world, or even just made a new MMO. Instead, they kept adding more and more expansions until players practically had to beg Blizzard for the original game back. And in 2019, Blizzard finally gave in and released classic servers that people could play on. In 2023, Classic World of Warcraft is massively popular and recently gained even more popularity because of a new challenge many people are taking up called Hardcore. Hardcore WoW is a way of playing the game where if you die, you delete your character. The reason this style of playing has become so popular is because this mimics real life in the most primal way possible. Everything you do in Hardcore World of Warcraft is 1,000 times more meaningful because there is always the threat of death. Gaining the competence and becoming that high level is so much more difficult yet so much more prestigious. Blizzard has noticed this and is making classic hardcore servers. Who knows, maybe Blizzard is finally taking a turn and understanding what players actually enjoy. Or maybe its player base will play Classic for the next 10 years until a better MMO finally releases and Blizzard realizes the massive opportunity they have missed.